some outcomes which are not very common, like mixed languages and so on. Other times there are more common outcomes like language contact, language shift, sometimes even leading to a language death, right? All these things. So, so today we will discuss about another such situation. So remember, we talked about that language contact often under normal circumstances, what happens, we have a stage of bilingualism that sometimes is followed by language shift. So there is another thing that happens when you languages come in contact. Languages have different status in the society, different communities representing different languages and so on. One such situation is what we call a diglossia. Diglossia, diglossia, both are used. So what is a diglossia? A diglossia is a scenario. What that happens is, sometimes what happens that the social distribution of the languages or the dialects in the society has a very strict segregation. So distribution is segregated in the sense that a society sometimes has many varieties of a language at its disposal, sometimes too many languages at its disposal, and those languages or the varieties will be distributed in terms of, let's say, regional or social class or whatever, different kinds of dimensions. And as a result of that, what is a possibility is that some varieties are used for certain purposes, some varieties are used for some other purposes. So it's a possibility, it's a real life possibility that not all the languages that are there in the social repertoire of available to the entire speech community are exploited for all the purposes. So sometimes there is a direct and very clear-cut division as to which language or which variety of the language is used for what purpose, and that is what brings us to a diglossic situation, diglossic, diglossic, whatever you call it, that kind of a scenario. So some societies have only two distinct varieties of a language, right? Two distinct variety. Now this let's go back to our debate about what is language and variety. There are all kinds of disagreements there. So sometimes varieties of Hindi could be called a dialect, sometimes there will be a claim of calling themselves another language, and so on. So there are to keep simple, there are two distinct varieties, be it varieties in terms of dialect, be it varieties in terms of language. There are two different varieties, and those two different varieties have very, very strict roles. This is what we mean by the distribution in terms of usage. So what are these two roles? One is called the high variety. High variety has a very different role as opposed to the low variety. So a diglossic situation is when you have at the very least two varieties, two languages or two varieties of the same language that has two distinct purposes. One is called the high variety, the other is called the low variety. These are different in terms of these few factors that I have mentioned here. So what is the high variety? High variety is highly codified. Now what we mean by highly codified is typically a language that is considered a standard language, in the sense that it has all the codes for codes useful for various purposes like administration, judiciary, education, and so on. And this is that another important factor is that this has a large and respected body of written literature. Often you would notice that you will talk about languages and some languages that are spoken by a handful of people, and they will like, oh no, they're not language, this is just something they just speak. So this kind of value judgments are typically dependent upon having a cultural artifact called the written part of it. Cultural artifact is when you have created something out of either in written form or in the form of art and whatever. So written literature or written variety of a language has a very, very important role to play in terms of the prestige you accord to a language. You can recall the long drawn debate about whether Sanskrit is older or Tamil is older, and the majority of that claim actually is based on when it was written, not when it was spoken, because that the written variety is the tangible, verifiable proof. So this is why it is very important that high varieties are typically those varieties that have a written literature, and it has a very codified, grammatically codified, and it has a very rich vocabulary. It is useful for various kinds of administrative or official purposes. Third important criterion of high variety is that it is learned by formal education. Typically, most of the cases in all speech communities, the language that you are taught in school, through education system of that particular given place and time, will be the high variety. So Sanskrit was a high variety at a given point of time. Now let's say English is the high variety in many diagnostic societies. So this is a language that is taught to you. You learn it through formal education. This is very often, generally, of an earlier period of, or sometimes of a different speech community. Earlier period in terms of a language that is older, that has a far more longer heritage and so on, or sometimes of a different speech community. Now this brings us to the scenario where you have war and conquest and so on. So another speech community coming into your land and imposing their language as the official language. Ratorat hota hai. So there is a sudden change of status of the languages that is spoken in a particular area. So Persian was the official language, or let's say the court language. Similarly, English became the official language, and so on. So these languages actually represent a different speech community, different from the local people who are there, who learn it as a formal language, as an official language, as a second language, or whatever. And this is the language that is used for all formal and written purposes. So even if you speak a different kind of English, let's say in the Coca market here or in anywhere in the IIT system, you will not write that. So when you write your formal proposals for research or your papers or anything, that language has to be strictly avoided. Though sometimes we have to remind the students about that. This is one issue, but this is typically why you often students don't understand what is happening. So I get those small short forms like B, T, and W for by the way, and I get between like B, T, N, and all such SMS language in the answer scripts. And I have to tell the students this is not how you write a formal. So there is a division between, even if it is the same language, you have to maintain a certain amount of codification that has to be intact in terms of formal and written purposes. So this is what we mean by formal purposes. The same language has a particular codified way of representation, and it is not used for ordinary communication. In diagnostic situation, it is not used for ordinary communication. Therefore, it cannot be learned as a first language. So let's go over the criteria one by one. It is highly codified. It has a large and respected body of written literature. It is typically learned through formal education, and it represents a different speech community sometimes, or a different era. And it is used. So the most important criteria is it is used for formal and written purposes, all sorts of formal purposes like education, like academy, like administration, like judiciary, and so on. And it is not used for ordinary communication. So the language that you use in administration is not used for marketplace communication. That is what we mean in a diagnostic situation. On the other hand, the low variety will be typically less complex grammatically, which typically points to certain varieties that are not yet that codified, or that allows for certain laxity in terms of grammaticality. Case in point, again, though India is not always a diagnostic situation, but just to give you an example, often we don't really care about the grammar while speaking in either Hindi or in English in colloquial usage. All kinds of structures are used. Either it becomes a fad, or it is just a passing phase in the life of people, young adults typically, and then gradually you outgrow that. So all, or it's just plain SMS language or WhatsApp language taking over your normal day-to-day conversation skill. The bottom line is that it is grammatically often generally less complex. And most important aspect of a low variety is that it is used for ordinary conversation, be it at home, be it in the playground, be it in the peer group, various social group, marketplace conversation, and so on. So because of that, because it is there all around you in the social sphere, it is often learned as the first language. This is the these two are the most important differences. So one is used for ordinary conversation. It is there, it is present in the social sphere. As a result, you can learn it as a first language. High variety is not present in the social sphere, and hence you do not learn it in the society. You learn it through formal education, and it is used for higher purposes. Low varieties sometimes can or may not have written body of literature. So may or may not, may, the case of when it has a written body of literature will be typically when you are the defeated community, when you are the subjugated one, when you are the one that has been defeated in either in a battle or in commercially or financially or whatever. So whether you have a literature or not doesn't really seem to matter, because you are the weaker section of the society. Or sometimes they do not have a written body of literature. Both are possible. And low variety differs across region, social class, and so on. So here you see in India, for example, in take the case of Assam or any other state, you can say that Assam has Assamese as the official language. The official Assamese language does not vary whether you are writing the document sitting in Guwahati or writing the document sitting in Jorhat, let's say. Jorhat is considered the hub of Upper Assam, Assamese culture, and so on. That doesn't differ. But the conversational aspect of the language, the low variety or whatever you call it, the colloquial Assamese changes. The spoken Assamese is different in Guwahati versus lower, as they call it, lower Assam and upper Assam, basically, which means Assam, eastern and western Assam. So eastern Assam is upper Assam and western Assam is lower Assam. So similarly in every other state, so languages differ. There are varieties of language. Every language has different varieties. One important criteria for varieties, for variation, is region. Different places within the same state will have different varieties of the language. So if you take UP, for example, or you take Bihar, for example, UP, the language spoken in Lucknow will be different from the language in Allahabad. It will be different again from Meerut, and so on. Similarly, all other places. So the low variety has the option of having varieties depending on region, social class. Sometimes class difference is also noticed, and so on. But the high variety does not allow for such kind of differentiation in terms of any social factor, whether it is regional or it is class or whatever. These are the two varieties in case of a diglossic situation. So these are different not only in terms of phonology, morphology, vocabulary, etc., the grammatical aspect, but also in terms of the social characteristics, and that is more important. So the function, where it is used, where what does it get you, the prestige factor, the literary heritage, the acquisition, standardization, and stability. So these are the factors that decide. So they are different grammatically. Of course they are different sometimes, but as you will when we discuss some chapters of papers or so, you will see that the grammatical difference sometimes is not so much. There are of course differences, but not so stark as the social differences, social characteristics, like function is the most serious criteria, and of course as a result of which the prestige difference, and then which is dependent on literary heritage. And because of this, the way you acquisition is how you learn the language, whether you learn it socially or you learn it through formal processes. That is acquisition. Standardization, the high variety is always a standard variety, and low varieties may or may not have their standard varieties, but it doesn't seem to matter because the function is very different. And stability, high variety is stable more or less across time and space, but low varieties are more open to change. High variety changes very slowly. So how do you know that? For example, the standard Hindi that we knew, that was there in our time when we were your age, it was the DD Hindi. By the way, there was only DD, Doordarshan, nothing else existed in our time. So that the Hindi that they spoke was the standard Hindi, but now things have changed so much, and now it is almost this almost resembles the colloquial Hindi. Similarly, the English that was considered in the English spoken by Indians, the brown sahibs, was the British English, the accent, the kind of pronunciation, the kind of everything, the entirety of it was the British English. But now, as you see, it is not British English anymore, and all the factors that decide this is, of course, the power structure globally, and the power structure that whoever is more important, more powerful, and so on. So now it is American English that we all aspire to speak, and so all that. So and now when you have a diglossic situation, there is a give and take between bilingualism and diglossic situation. So because I will be yes, go ahead.
In case of India, ma'am, higher variety is English.
We come to it because we will see sometimes there is a four-way path. There is a permutation combination of bilingualism and diglossia. So let me first discuss that so that some points will be clear, and then we will come to it. Right. So I'll come back to you after that discussion. So I was talking about, so we are discussing diglossia. So now, because diglossia, sometimes, as you see, diglossia means there has to be two varieties. Now, these two varieties may result in bilingualism, or widespread social bilingualism, or may not. So hence, we need to talk about bilingualism in very, very short here. So there is, in a society when there is no restriction on learning each other's language, that is one important criterion. Second is the government policies encourage the same, and social, cultural, political systems demand the use of more than one language. Then we have a fluid bilingual scenario, which is the case in India. So in India, there is no restriction. I can learn any of the Indian languages if I wish to, if I put some effort to it. So all of us speak at least 3 languages, sometimes 4, 5. Some people even speak more than that. So that is something that the society allows that, and sometimes necessitates that. If you are staying in a state outside of your own, for example, all of you, when you come back here, you, after staying for 4 years in Assam, many of you actually start speaking decent Assamese. So something like that. So sometimes the society makes it convenient. Sometimes the government encourages, because in India we have 3 language formula. So there is an encouragement from the government side, policy wise, and so on. So when this kind of conducive atmosphere is there, society by and large may choose to become bilingual or multilingual society. So there we have a bilingual scenario, right? And why did I just discuss this? Now we can see that bilingualism and diglossia often cross paths. Diglossia is a characterization of linguistic organization at socio-cultural level, as we have just seen, that there are varieties, more than one variety, and they have strict roles to play. Whereas bilingualism has to do with individual linguistic behavior. Sometimes it may or may not become a social reality. So what happens now? Taking these two things together, you have 4 possibilities if you combine them. One is, for example, sometimes they can coexist, sometimes they do not coexist, and so on. So one is, first and foremost, is both bilingualism and diglossia are present in the society. The exact opposite would be neither bilingualism nor diglossia is present. Sometimes bilingualism can exist without diglossia. Sometimes diglossia can exist without bilingualism. So we will discuss each of them in a bit of detail. Of course, there are papers and books written on these areas. So but brevity of time, we will just discuss them in very, very brief. So the most simplistic situation is when both bilingualism and diglossia are present in the society. So there are situations, there are communities when that are both bilingual and diglossic, right? So sometimes nations are like that. So one such case is Paraguay. There are many others, but Paraguay is one such, where the entire population speak both Spanish and Guarani. Guarani is the native language. Spanish was, of course, the colonizers' language, and it stayed on just like English. So Spanish is the official language. Guarani is the language of communication at the social level. So formally, rural population has learned Spanish in order to enter status stressing spheres. So like education, religion, government, high culture, and so on, much like India. So if you speak English, you have entry into, so the capacity to speak good Spanish or that can make or mar somebody's career in Paraguay. On the other hand, city dwellers maintain the use of Guarani in domains of primary group solidarity. So family and social group and peer group and so on, they still maintain the use of Guarani. However, Guarani is never used for official purposes, and Spanish is never used for the social level common colloquial conversations. Similar situation exists in many other countries and many other societies. For example, throughout the Arab world, the upper and middle class people maintain the use of high variety of Arabic for all the official purposes. I think there is some kind of typo here, Egyptian. I'll change that later. High variety, that is Quranic variety of Arabic, is the official language. However, the vernaculars like Egyptian, Syrian, Lebanese, etc., those varieties of Arabic are used for all the they are the low varieties, meaning they are the language for colloquial purposes. So marketplace in Lebanon, you will have Lebanese Arabic. In Syria, you will have Syrian Arabic, and so on. But even in Syria, the official language will be official language for administration and all that will be still be the Quranic Arabic, so high Arabic. So Arab world has high Arabic and low Arabic. That is the diglossia as well as bilingualism when they coexist. On the other hand, as I said, the other opposite, extreme opposite would be you have neither bilingualism nor diglossia. So basically, this is a situation where this is a very, very small monolingual community. When you don't have to have too many languages, you can only one language can suffice. So only very small, homogeneous, isolated speech communities can be said to qualify for this. And that is why you don't find this in large scale populations. Very, very small, like, isolated pockets of monolingual communities can have this. So bilingualism bhi nahi hai, diglossia bhi nahi hai. So given very little role differentiation, let's say some very small tribal community, so role differentiations are not so much present there. More often than not, they will be egalitarian. So there is no, administrative class, so to say. There is no king, so to say. So all kinds of things. So as a result of which, there is no necessity for either social stratification of language or purposes, giving rise to different kinds of varieties. So it does not exist. However, more common is bilingualism without diglossia. For example, when both languages in a society where both languages, we are talking only about two languages right now, but more languages can also exist. So both languages are used across domains. So that is a community, there is a let's say a nation state where you have two languages and both are used for all kinds of purposes across domains. So you can use, let's say, English and French. You can use English for official purposes as well as colloquial purposes. Similarly, French is used for higher purposes as well as low purposes, in the sense of official as well as non-official, formal and informal purposes. In that is a situation where there is bilingualism, but there is no diglossia. Sometimes language use does not depend on the domain. If it is a higher domain, you have to use one language, and lower domain another language. It is not like that. Rather, topic wise, sometimes let's say if you are discussing highbrow literature and you are more comfortable in French, then you switch to French rather than in English, and so on. For example, one case in point here is Singapore. Singapore is a multilingual nation state where there are many languages which are officially recognized. Tamil is one of them, Malay, Chinese, as well as English. So these four are the official languages. Yes, somebody's, asking something.
Ma'am,
Bolo. Yes, go ahead.
is there any specific reason behind that there didn't formed any pidgin in Paraguay?
Yes, because probably the situation was not segregated, like just like unlike the places where they had slavery. Because the social segregation is a very important aspect of pidgin. You cannot learn the master's language. You cannot. There is no, forget about in encouragement. This is discouraged. You are not supposed to learn the master's language. That is when a pidgin is formed. But in a society that is a little more relaxed, in a more societal give and take is allowed, like it happened in India. So even if we were considered natives, we were considered a second rate citizen and so on, but still people could learn English. Similar things happened in Paraguay also. So even though the Spanish people came and conquered over them, and initially there was, of course, a lot of they have a bloody history, very sad and bloody history. But anyways, Guarani was maintained, and Spanish was taught to them. Spanish could be learned, and Spanish gradually became an official language, just like English in India. And that kind of scenario did not emerge. Initially, there was a lot of oppression and so on, but it did not turn into a slavery and slaves and master kind of equation in the long-term scenario, and that is why this did not happen. Yes,
just like Hindi and English.
Hindi and English, yes, right. It ultimately it all boils down to the social reality. How much how much of segregation is there. So bilingualism without diglossia is a situation where you have many languages, as a result of which you have bilingualism or multilingualism, but none of them is used typically for high purpose or low purpose. So in Singapore, for example, you can use any of the 4 languages as official language, and all the 4 languages are also used for social purposes. So this is where I would take up Garvit. I think Garvit was the person who asked the question. In India, yes. In India, the scenario is not comparable to Singapore, because Singapore is a small place and India is vast and very varied. So in India, if we talk about the scenario about whether it is diglossic, whether it is bilingualism without diglossia or with diglossia, we need to take a more specific location, let's say. So in the urban scenario, I would say, in the urban scenario, let's in any big city in India, you use English, Hindi, and the language of that state. So for example, if it is Assamese, it is Hindi, English, and Assamese. It is any other Delhi, Hindi, English, Kolkata, Bengali, Hindi, English, like that. So now here comes the government policies again. So in India, we have this 3 language formula. So English is there, it has to be there, it is the official language. And then Hindi is also there, and it's some kind of whatever term it is used for these days, but it is also there. So all official documents are bilingual and sometimes trilingual. So there is also a state official language. As you know, Indian states were divided on linguistic lines. So every state has at least one official language, sometimes more than one. So Gurkha Nepali is one of the official languages in Bengal. It is used widely in Darjeeling district. I hope all of you know that Darjeeling belongs to West Bengal. So Darjeeling has Nepali as an official language, and as a result, all documents are written in official documents are in English, Hindi, and Nepali. Bangla is often not there, but in the rest of Bengal, Bangla will be one of the official languages that will be sharing the space along with Hindi and English. So this kind of a government policy automatically allows you not to have a diglossic situation. So you can use Hindi. For example, all of you can write your JEE in English as well as in Hindi, right? And I think nowadays there is a government is trying to include local languages in education, higher education as well. They are even testing water for if the JEE can be written in many other regional languages. So that is a new education policy that for which feedback is sought. So this is the government policy. This kind of policy in India has been there forever, ever since the constitution. So often because of this, often there is no diglossic scenario. So you use the English you use for official purposes is the language that you speak, and except minor things here and there, but that is more of what do you call it, age related thing rather than an across society problem. So, and Hindi similarly, the Hindi that you speak in the cities is the Hindi that you write also, the official Hindi or standard Hindi or whatever you call it. However, if you go to the rural scenario, rural situation, things change a little bit. For example, you go to a place like what any rural area in India, for example, you go there and the language that you speak, for example, in Ghaziabad, I don't know, I have not been to Ghaziabad. This is just an example, so don't take it otherwise. If anybody from Ghaziabad is present in this class, so let's say Ghaziabad Hindi is not considered the formal Hindi. So you might be speaking in a particular variety of Hindi, but you do not write in that Hindi. So the population that speaks Ghaziabad Hindi in the marketplace, at home, with friends and with families and so on, when they write an official document, that will not use that kind of variety, but they will have to fall back on the formal Hindi. That is the Hindi that is used for higher purposes. In that case, it will be considered a diglossic situation. Similarly, let's say for a minority language speaker, coming back to Assam again, there are lots of tribal languages, indigenous languages that are spoken in Assam, but not all of them have an official status. So let's say there's a language called Missing. So Missing language speakers will are in a situation where it is bilingualism with diglossia, because Missing language is not an official language. So they can use Missing for their intra-community communication, but they cannot use it for official purposes. They have to use either Assamese or Hindi or English or whatever. So that there in India, situation differs depending on where you are and which speech community you represent. Singapore is pretty simple because it's a very small place, but in larger places, things can change depending on where you are placed. So that brings us to diglossia without bilingualism. This happens when two or more communities are united in some way. Sometimes it can be religiously, sometimes politically or economically into a single large functioning unit, even though they are socially disparate groups. Now, at this level, the two language and varieties are there are two levels or two level of one language or two varieties exist. However, one or both groups are marked by impermeable. This is the textbook language. Impermeable boundary means the two groups do not interact. So this is a community. This is at the macro level. There are different communities that are together. However, there is a strict boundary between them. They are connected through some kind of a unifying unit, whether it is religion, whether it is political power, sometimes it is economical thing or whatever. However, because there is not much of give and take, there is no fluid bilingualism. However, diglossia can exist in such scenario as well. So the one case in point is where you have this. So First World War, many European communities had this arrangement where the elites and their countrymen had a diglossic scenario. So elites would often speak French. So there were few languages that were considered elite at that time, right? So French was one of them, English in some cases, and so on. So the high variety would be used for intra-group within that high group. So the high group, high variety, low group, low variety. Low in the sense of power. So two communities rarely interacted and had severely restricted role repertoire, meaning the low variety had no representation in the high society, or high society had no had hardly any representation in the low group. As a result of which there was no large-scale social bilingualism. You may wonder, in such a situation, how will the society function? Of course, there were some people who were go-betweens between the groups, but that never becomes a large-scale societal bilingualism, because the interaction is very, very restricted. Similarly, nationalized diglossia did not imply large-scale bilingualism for many African countries. Similarly, African countries where, for example, they had Dutch or Portuguese or English or French colonizers, so the westernized elites of the society, they will speak either the Dutch or French or whatever, and the rest of the natives will be speaking the local languages like Swahili, Zulu, or whatever, and they did not speak the same language. Same situation actually exists in India also, though we don't always see it. and things are changing gradually. So the elite in India actually are the ones that speak English, that go to, you know,
Ma'am, you are not audible.
Ma'am, you are not audible.
Ma'am has left the meeting, I think.